Okay, welcome back to Professor Simon. I think we both are just looking at the reaction and the comments from our interview with Dan Isbell, and I really think it was a historic interview.
Oh, Chris, it was fantastic. Dan is an absolute legend. It was so good that we both covered him, and we're very honored to be kind of contacted by test pilot Dan and his story that he has kept secret for over 45 years is incredibly interesting. The more I, thought about it and what he saw, the nature of the craft, where it was at the time in history, its relationship possibly to the Rendlesham Forest incident. Yeah, what kind of feedback have you been getting on your channel from the interview?
The comments have been overwhelmingly positive. I don't remember, maybe Doc Rogers had just the same amount of overwhelmingly positive comments, but I think everyone is just happy that he came out and his credibility. Dan has so much experience. He had so many stories and he has so many more. I had quite a few comments actually asking to have him back on just to talk about his aviation stories further. So maybe I'll do that.
Yeah. What's your thoughts? I mean, a big question, Chris, Lehto. What do you think he saw? You know, have other people seen similar craft? And if so, what's your views on it? I mean, the big question, NHI or USAF?
That's the big question, right? And we asked Dan that, do you think it could have been reverse engineered? And he said potentially, possibly, it felt like he didn't want to rule it out, but the impression I got is he thought it was NHI is the impression I got, especially from his later encounters. When he's getting out of the hot tub and he has the orb above him, the craft above him, and that's where he described it as it basically went to a plasma ball, a perfectly circular white plasma ball, and then really interestingly, it quantized where it doubled in size, and then it went to another third in size. So he said a total of four times the original size of the plasma ball before it shut off. I thought that was really interesting. I've been thinking more about that encounter, and I talked to a physicist, Nassim Haramein. That interview will come out in a few weeks. Really interesting interview. Again, talking about this quantization of space, 0-point energy, etc.
To make it clear, the concept and the word quantize is where something isn't analog. It's not turning up a volume control smoothly. It's jumping in defined steps. We see this in nature. It seems counterintuitive, but for example, electrons are in defined orbital energy levels. They don't drift between them. They stay in one and go snap and are in a lower level and throw away energy in the form of photons. And plasma does that as well. So it's very, very much a thing of physics. And it proves in a way that it's a bigger force of nature from our universe. It's not a throttle quadrant, is it, Chris? It's something which jumps.
Yeah, I was really very pleasantly surprised to hear at the end of our interview where Dan really talks about the plasma universe or the electric universe. Thunderbolts Project is another YouTube channel I follow closely. I watch all their videos. And his impression was that the craft are getting the energy from the quantum vacuum, if you will, basically the 0-point energy, which after talking with Nassim Haramein and he is investigating this, is basically the 0 point is at 0 Kelvin. There is still an amazing amount of energy in that area of space, and our current physics just says there's no energy in empty space. At 0 Kelvin, there's no energy in the system, right? They say that there's no vibrations, there's no energy, there's no temperature. but 0 point
Right.
energy means at 0 degrees Kelvin, there is still an amazing amount of energy. And that was Dan Isbell's, I guess, his intuition
Yeah.
or his suspicion is that these craft are they're they're pulling the energy from that quantum vacuum. They're pulling 0 point energy, and that's how they're able to use these amazing physics.
I completely agree. I think that opens a can of worms of what we're told in conventional physics. I mean, I think that a lot of physics that we are taught and we kind of use are physics that fit physics models. And there's tons of evidence out there, coming from James Webb Space Telescope, even about the age of the universe and inflation theory, and as you say, the connectivity and energy that's in our universe doesn't fit the standard model of physics. And I think we need to expose that and have interesting physics thinkers, like guests that we both have on our shows, to actually discuss it more open-mindedly. I think it's so true.
Yeah, and it was amazing to hear from Dan Isbell because test pilots, and he talked about how he became a test pilot. He actually didn't have the hours required to be a test pilot, but and I've learned this over the years. Test pilots, when you go through test pilot school, is actually you're doing a thesis. You're actually going through and it's much more science nerdy program than you would originally expect. You imagine a test pilot, they just go to the plane, everything's already been decided, and then they do the actual test, okay, go this speed, this out, everything right to these exact parameters. But actually, no, the test pilots are very integral in creating the tests and actually determining what, the aerodynamics, the electronics, everything deeply related to the testing of that airframe, so that it's much nerdier than you would suspect. And like he mentioned, when he created that radio that would just tie directly into the battery of the F-111, the aardvark, that is a huge thing, because even in the F-16, we can only have the battery on for 15 minutes. So we would actually, let's say if your wingman, his plane breaks, which happens a lot, and he has to step to a new plane, and it takes him, say, 30 minutes to run to the other plane, he's sweating, get it ready, everything started again. We actually we'll turn the battery off, turn everything off, and just sit there in a dead plane, essentially, and wait 20 minutes, and then we turn the battery back on, because you don't want to waste that battery. But then you can use the radio. And so Dan actually created his own invention, if you will, where he connected the battery to the radio in the aardvark. And he knew all this stuff.
Prior to you having any battery, which is powerful enough to turn on avionics, you would have to run the engine, which is to get generator. Is that right?
No. So you'll have a battery and it recharges through the generator. So you have 15 minutes of battery essentially, and it's based on voltage. When your battery So you have at least in the F-16 anyway, we have at least 15 minutes of just straight battery usage, and even when the engine fails, you actually have a limited, and that is quite a serious issue. Is you only have about 15 minutes of battery use. So if the battery is powering any sort of your major systems, like it can't power the hydraulics, etc. So no, generally in aircrafts, at least in the F-16. The generators recharge the battery consistently. It's kind of like how it works in your car, essentially. That once your alternator goes, your battery only has a certain usable time limit. But my point is, that's how Dan got to be a test pilot. Is he knows about electronics. He knows how electrics work. At a engineering level, like he engineered these systems, and so to hear his impressions of how these craft work was really interesting, and I think we should listen to these people. And that's where we're going to get the most information. Observations about the universe from really smart, intelligent people, and then use those observations to update our theories. Where it seems like now our science, they're just theorists. They're just sitting in their basements or sitting in rooms with not even lab equipment, and they're coming up with theories, and then they're telling all of these people, very smart, intelligent people like Dan Isbell, and that it doesn't exist. What he saw cannot exist, which I think is just ridiculous.
All right, yeah. And I think it's even worse than that. I think that funding now for science is like you just can't push boundaries. It seems, that you only get funding as a continuation of the present paradigm, all physics, and anything novel, just forget it. It's just it's really strange. I mean, do you think, Chris, that they're hiding something? Is there a kind of a black world of physics of better knowledge, and a kind of a bollocks world of white physics where we're going, that's as much as you need to know?
I mean, a few years ago, I would assume that thought is just ridiculous, and that's the land of conspiracy theorists, and there's no way that could be possible. But now I think that's actually more probable than not. Is actually that this physics has been hidden. And again, I keep mentioning this guest, Nassim Haramein, but his first paper that came out in 2004, he published it, and the next day it was taken down by Los Alamos. And his paper actually related to nuclear energy, right? So essentially the quantum vacuum, where you could, there is some sort of what used to be called an ether medium, and now they call it the quantum vacuum. It's kind of like you can't say UFOs anymore. We have to say UAPs. They changed the word. So you can't say the ether. So now it's quantum vacuum.
Right.
But really, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about a medium that pervades all of the space that we know of. And in the past, this was called the luminiferous ether. But you can't say that, or you're laughed out of the room. So now they just say, oh, it's the quantum vacuum, right? They call it the quantum vacuum. But it is the same thing. It's a medium. And I think it has been hidden.
Well, my kind of thought on this is that there's a really good bit of evidence that there is hidden physics, and that is when the Trinity Manhattan Project turned a blackboard physics equation into a bomb. It was the ultimate weapon that used physics to weaponize something which the enemy wouldn't know what hit them. And it seems to me that ever since World War II, that the military have needed advanced physics, or have wanted more advanced physics to come along, to be the ultimate secret unknown stick. I mean, you must have come across just bits of technology that you go, whoa, you don't get that in the Apple store. I mean, which is fair enough. I mean, military needs to have that kind of thing. But has the military desire to have advanced physics kept physics secret? I mean, anti-gravity research must have been of great interest to defense contractors, and zero-point energy and energy saving and energy conversation, whatever the word is, conservation, and generally that kind of technology we don't have. But does the military? I mean, when you were in the military, was it genuinely 50 years ahead of what you could buy in the Apple store?
Not that I saw, I was, but even in the military, it's very walled off. There's walled gardens. The special access program is a bigoted list. I was working on simulator systems at Luke Air Force Base, and they wouldn't let me see the simulator for the F-35, even though I did work on ancillary parts of the F-35 simulator. They never let me actually fly it in any manner, and so they're very picky on how many people can be on the list. There's limits to that, and which people are on the list. And I wasn't important enough to be on that list. and also knew very little to nothing about satellite systems. Even though we used ComSec, it was extremely secret, and we used all the GPS data, the almanac data. We dropped GPS
Yeah,
weapons, so we had to know a lot about how GPS systems work. But
right.
but just from an operational perspective, we knew just the minimum to actually use the systems and to fix any faults and etc. But how it actually worked, the satellite constellation systems, or how the satellites worked, was deeply held secret. So no, it's very walled off, walled garden.
Yeah, I've just had a fascinating conversation with Nick Cook, who was the aerospace editor for Jane's Defense Weekly. He did an interview with Jesse Michaels talking about the mythical Aurora spy plane, and my background very much is growing up with parents who worked at the military base RAF Machrihanish in a civil capacity for the government. And Aurora was the buzzword at the time. But what Nick Cook claims, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is that at, at the end of the Cold War, there was when SR-71s or A-12s were being a bit long in the tooth, and U-2s were really old, but still fantastic, wonderful airplanes. The NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office, was still waiting for live space-based enemy of the state type video pictures from a war zone to be beamed onto their, flat screen TVs in Langley or wherever, and it wasn't available yet. And so he's saying that the Aurora program, from what he got an interview with a senior DoD person, was just a project name for a stopgap measure for an airplane with some capabilities from an NRO wish list, such as I want a spy plane that goes higher. I want a spy plane that goes faster. I want a spy plane that incorporates stealth. And I want a spy plane that is unmanned. And that's what we've got today. I mean, Global Hawk, what's the percentage of unmanned aircraft in the U.S. Air Force today? Isn't it some staggering number?
I don't know actually. When I was in Iraq, I think there was only 5 Predators over Iraq at any one time, and
Right.
I remember complaining, not not politically in a politically correct manner in the bar to a general, and he wasn't happy about it. But basically saying is we should have had Predators covering Iraq. It shouldn't have been just 5. They were using F-16s to do this kind of ISR surveillance mission. That's
Right.
perfect. Yeah, that's perfect for Predators or your long duration, cheap to operate drones. So that was 2005 and 6. We only had 5 over Iraq. I think now it would be reversed. So I think you'd have way more drones. And when I was leaving
Well,
the Air Force, that was
right,
the idea. Fighting over the Taiwan Straits, you're basically
right.
going to have, unmanned UCAVs, so unmanned combat UAVs out in front, and then as the first tier, and then your second tier would have your manned fighters, maybe even further back, um, you know, providing control for those UAVs. But that's the future of warfare, as we're seeing.
Oh, unmanned combat drones. I
Yep.
mean, whoa, blowing, Chris. I've thought about high altitude reconnaissance drones, and some of them obviously do. They drop bombs and missiles, but an actual replacement for the OODA loop trained pilot. That's
Yep.
pretty sophisticated. Wow. Okay, so and did you ever come across the concept of a loyal wingman, where you would be a pilot, but you would have a couple of unmanned things helping you?
Never operationally. We
Right.
heard about it. That was the idea, right? The F-22, the F-35 would have these loyal wingmen, and the Air Force does
Right.
now have a program. They call them,
Mm.
can't remember what the acronym stands for, but basically, yeah, you have loyal wingmen, and we did actually plan. Cruise missiles in a manner are they're your programmed
Right.
UCAVs essentially. They don't come back, but they are unmanned aerial
Right.
vehicles, and they air breathing systems that are going to go and
Yeah.
hit a certain target. So 1 second, Simon. Sorry, my dog is.
Y-
I need to go let him out.
He needs to go out.
Fluffy, yeah. I didn't want him to come down here. I knew he'd want to go up. Okay.
Go on, Fluffy. Hey.
Yeah.
Good
My
on.
wife,
Good
my
on.
wife's, my wife said, "Tell Simon that we got a new puppy,
Oh, great.
another little fluffy, super cute."
Oh, well, we have three. Uh, our old dog is called a Muamua, which drives that. I mean, you try and go to the vet, and they go moo. I go, yeah, Muamua, that's right. And we used to have Laika after the space dog. And now we inherited a dog with a name that's called Dolly, so she's just Hello Dolly, which is fine. And my collie, my personal dog, is named after the French kinetic artist Jean Tinguely, who
Mm.
because she's just kinetic, which is great. Yeah.
Um,
So
um,
no, we love them.
awesome. But I think kind of what we talked about before that, if I was in modern warfare at the time, I would
Right.
want what you've mentioned is a long loiter, high altitude balloon type system. Because the problem with satellites is if they're in low Earth orbit, they're going very fast. So you're only going to see them come over a certain area. They're very difficult to move. And if you want them to be geostationary, now they're going to be very far away, because your orbit has to match the spin of the Earth. And it depends where you're looking on the Earth. But basically, they're going to be many tens of thousands of kilometers. So you would have to have much larger cameras, etc. So what I would want is
Right.
something that could float much closer, like a Chinese spy balloon that you would
Right.
be maybe higher and have some stealth capability to it, be difficult to see. So that's what I would want, is some sort of aerogel drone. And I haven't seen anything in that nature.
Oh, you have. Well, no, you haven't seen them, but no, they do. They totally exist.
Yeah.
There's a program. They don't talk about the nature of the type of craft very much, apart from they call them buoyant. I mean, they don't describe why and how they're buoyant. I mean, some of them are hydrogen, helium, but there's the program goes under this kind of pseudonym of calling them pseudo-satellites.
Hmm.
They're not satellites because they're still in the stratosphere, but they're way above flight levels. They're 60 plus thousand feet. I hear they might be 80 plus thousand feet. And they were on the wish list of the National Reconnaissance Office way back. One of the possibilities of what Aurora actually, the legacy of Aurora as a program that is just a test program was unmanned aerial vehicles and high altitude long loitering surveillance drones. And then the other thing that you can do from these long loitering craft is that you no longer actually have conventional, as we would think, cameras on them. You have a very, very sophisticated sensor array, which is a combination of synthetic SAR, synthetic aperture radar stuff for altitude and obviously seeing through poor weather conditions, and maybe material recognition. That's quite controversial. But the other system, which is definitely out there and definitely known, is a system, an AI system. One of the names that's been bandied around is Gorgon Stare. And
Hmm.
the idea of Gorgon Stare which almost definitely was used in the Middle East, is it's time-based media. So what if you can record everything in downtown wherever in the Middle East, you can look into the past, see the current, and then work out the future. So you can actually say when an IUD goes off, where and there's a car seen in the vicinity, you can rewind Gorgon Stare to say where did that blue pickup truck come from, and then you can say where is it now. So you've got past, the incident, and the future. Now that's real amazing surveillance, and that's. And for that, as you say, Chris, you need long loitering, big, very high resolution overview.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple things there. One is SAR, synthetic aperture radar, and I've looked into that a lot recently with Dr. Biondi when he talked about being able to scan under the ground using synthetic aperture radar. And I think these high altitude systems are probably not going to use that. And the simple reason is now you have to, it's an active system. So you're sending out electrons, you're sending out signals, which means you're highlighting yourself to everyone.
You're there, right?
Yeah. But what is very good, and that's why FLIR is very good, or what you mentioned there is just listening to signals. So that would be, an amazing capability is listening to cell phone signals of like people in vehicles that are putting down IEDs, et cetera, where the IED signal is emanating from to set off the device. So listening, passive, it would all be passive. You're not going to have active sensors up there because then you just highlight your position easily to enemy systems.
Yeah. And just this last week, we were all learning about what current Russia is doing with the world's biggest passive radar, which literally is turning Western Europe into its own Soviet radar system, because passive radar, when you fly through, even with a stealth aircraft, here's my stealth aircraft, through radio signals, through cell phone signals, through Wi-Fi, through everything, you can detect something passively without sending out an active beam that gives away your signal. So passive radar is massively important. Have you heard that passive radar can pick up a conventionally stealthed aircraft that might be only stealth from an enemy's microwave radar?
Yeah, I mean, luckily I don't know anything of any sort of classified nature on this. But what you can tell if you just look into unclassified information on it, yes. So stealth aircraft are flying through the air. They're equipped to not be seen to radar energy, meaning they absorb it or deflect it off at weird angles so it doesn't go back to the receiver, but they're still flying through the air. So it reminds me of in Star Trek, when Captain Kirk, when they're seeing the stealth, what was it, the Wrath of Khan ship?
The cloaked ships of the Klingons or the Romulans. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I think it was specifically in Wrath of Khan when Kirk, he brings Spock over and he says, "Look, you can see it there, and you can tell where the cloak was because it slightly moves the background radiation, right?" And that's basically what you're talking about. Is through the air right now, it's full of electromagnetic radiation from all of our signals, radar, everything.
An enormous grid. Imagine a grid which gets slightly bent or distorted by anything.
Yeah,
even a stealthy aircraft. Yeah,
exactly. And for stealth aircraft, even they're stealth to certain wavelengths. You can't be stealth to everything, at least not that we know of, unless and I wanted to bring this back to Dan Isbell's interview. He talked about when he was at Edwards Air Force Base, he thought of a way to stealth aircraft. And I've heard of this before where you could use some sort of plasma. if you could sheath the aircraft, the leading
Oh,
edge of an aircraft, in some sort of ionized gas, which is a plasma, then
yep.
theoretically you could just absorb all of the radar energy. In that case, maybe it would absorb all of the radar energy, so then it wouldn't reflect anything. And so in that case, you could stealth an aircraft. That would be, I guess, active stealth, which again I've never heard of, which is why I can talk about it, because I have no knowledge of it, any sort of classified sense.
You were reading the wrong book. Active stealth, yeah, using plasma was part, as far, I mean, what do I know? But as far as I have heard, the input nose cones of the SR-71s are massive, and obviously they're spikes that move to redirect the shockwave of supersonic air. But they are an incredibly strong radar return. And so an early plasma stealth application was just to coat the pointy bit of the inlet nose cone of the SR-71 with an electrical field, a plasma, an ionized charge section that would at least reduce the radar signature of a very, very active radar target. Ooh. Possibly.
Yeah, and I've heard that multiple times. I think it's these concepts aren't
right.
that difficult to come up if you have a basic understanding of how the systems work. But another interesting point Dan Isbell talked about was, first, his sighting at Upper Hayford was a triangle. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
We heard Borland talk about that. But what was different about the triangle that Dylan Borland talked about in the UAP hearings is that was your standard TR3B. And it seemed to have propulsion it had light balls at the three corners and then one larger kind of plasma ball right in the center of the craft. Whereas what Dan Isbell talked about is the whole craft was coated in some sort of plasma colored sheath. And this is basically, that's very similar to what Doc Rogers talked about. We mentioned him before. He said he watched a video of a test vehicle. It was actually saucer shaped. It was fully saucer shaped, right? It wasn't triangular shaped. But he mentioned around it when it was doing its crazy anti-gravity system and orienting up at 45 degrees and turning around. He said there was some sort of electrostatic electrics around it, and he didn't want to describe actually in detail what it looked like, because he does not want to give away any sort of I guess classified data or any data to help the adversary. But I thought that was interesting.
Oh, completely agree. Yeah, there's obviously something in it. My overview of this is that we are very basic meat puppets with incredibly narrow senses, and the universe is much wider and bigger and much more connected, and we live in this bubble of perception surrounded by much more interesting things. When we call UAP UFOs multidimensional, I think that it's probably correct. I mean, I think it's very unlikely that they're aluminum solid flying saucers. I much prefer to think that they are in a physics that we can only barely perceive, and as occasionally they pop into our reality either by mistake or intentionally for purpose, and it's really fascinating. We need the science to actually start thinking out of the box and looking multidimensionally into UAP.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And it seems quite clear. I think we are actually getting closer to an answer. I think it is clear that our physics went off the rails at World War II.
Sure.
I think that was a very emotional. World War II still affects our world in a very serious manner. And I think if you look, that's when Nikola Tesla's work was classified. You know, there's very good argument that it's still classified, and that's what Nikola Tesla argued is that there is a quantum vacuum. There's energy throughout the system. We're all basically connected through some sort of medium. And I think it's coming out. I think many people have come to the same conclusion. That's what I found looking just with help of AI in my basement. I found the same thing. Salvatore Pais, he found the same thing. I'm meeting with him again in a couple weeks. Hopefully we can push his theory further on the superforce. And like I mentioned, Nassim Haramein, he also found the same thing. And I think I really believe he will get a Nobel Prize for his work on proving this. He actually has proven it, and he used the same knowledge and technique to show the true radius of the proton, the charge radius of the proton in 2013. Brilliant. And when we talk about, do you think this has been censored? I think it's very clear. In 2013, he released a paper saying, oh no, the actual radius of the proton is 4% smaller than what current code data is, what they've used in physics for the last 7 decades. And they said, no, it's obviously this is bunk pseudoscience. But sure enough, in 2018, they updated the actual experimental code data radius of the proton to make it to what his number was that he calculated. And it's not like, the radius was 5 or something. It's 0.0000841296. It's to like 10 digits. And so he showed that. And again, they still say it's not correct, but he's coming out with another paper. So I think we are getting closer to an answer. And I think it went off the rails in World War II for obvious reasons. If your adversary, imagine North Korea, or imagine your enemies in Syria, etc. Able to use advanced physics to now do some of the things that we see UAPs doing, which is going faster than light, getting unimaginable energy direct from the quantum vacuum. All of a sudden, it destabilizes the world, and they can create amazing weapon systems, etc. But sooner or later, we have to grow up. I think humanity has to grow up, and we have to realize that we're surrounded by energy. There's no lack of resources. It's really just, can we mentally be mature enough to deal with abundance? Yeah. Can we actually deal with being part of a larger universe? Because I completely agree. I think it's consciousness based, like you mentioned. Imagine a dog lives in a totally different reality than you or I do.
They do. Wonderful reality. It's a joy. I've always wanted to ask you something, Chris.
Sure.
And it's something which I have had a real difficulty in understanding the logic behind this. And that's, why do you think that we have so much cases of UAP UFOs being attracted to nuclear sites when, let me give you my bollocks overview, or the thing that I'm having a difficulty with is a nuclear weapon or a nuclear power station is incredibly shielded. It has to be. If you're going to load a nuclear bomb onto your plane or somebody's plane from a weapons store where we have UFOs hovering over, it's inert at the time, it's shielded, it needs to be handleable. You in the plane don't want to die because it's radioactive. A nuclear power station, is in a reactor vessel, and it's got human shielding of tons of concrete around it, and obviously it's not very radio. What's your thoughts on how and why a UFO UAP could detect or be interested in a nuclear site, unless they're looking at history, to know that it's there, because there's nothing emanating. There's no particles. There's no physics comes out of a weapons store.
Are you sure? No.
Right.
That's not true, actually. From what we currently understand or believe in mainstream science, is that you can fully shield using a Faraday cage, right? You can shield all the electromagnetic information, all the information
Right.
in that area of space. But that's not true, right? If you look at our current physics, look at neutrinos, right? Because neutrinos, and again, we've never directly detected neutrinos. It's a part of our theory that when a neutron decays, it decays into a proton, an electron, and some additional form of energy, and that's what we call a neutrino. But if you actually go and look into what neutrinos are and the actual proof that neutrinos actually exist in the way we understand it, it's very nebulous, I would say. It's not hardcore theory. I wouldn't bet my life on it exactly, that neutrinos exist. The other thing is you can pass neutrinos through any object. You know, they have it was a scientific experiment where they wrote a word through concrete, by transmitting neutrinos. Neutrinos emit from any nuclear reaction, and that's actually what I think is the ice cube detector. You know, that's your kilometer by kilometer array down in Antarctica.
Antarctic, yeah.
Yep. So it can detect where neutrinos come from. And so if you had a few of these systems around the planet, theoretically, you could triangulate where any nuclear reaction is occurring on the Earth. And so you could start tracking things that are moving, such as nuclear reactors that power ships, etc., submarines.
Yeah.
And again, I have no knowledge of any of this stuff, so I'm just speculating, and I don't speak for any government agency by far on anything. But if you did have enough of these detectors, you could start triangulating where neutrinos are coming from, and every nuclear reaction is going to create neutrinos, and they go through anything. So saying that,
anything.
Yeah, exactly. And there's experiments showing that it goes through like 30 feet of concrete. And so that would also explain to me the Bob Salas encounter, where he's at Malmstrom Air Force Base, and he was down in the silo when 10 nuclear missiles were taken offline by a UAP, a large red orb at the front gate. And so the question is, how is that possible, right? If these ICBMs are shielded against nuclear EMPs, right? That's why you have these giant thick doors for your ICBM missile silos, is so your enemy can't explode a nuke right above these silos and all of a sudden EMP all of your missiles. So they're shielded. But they were all sent offline at the same time. And I think it's their INSs were messed with. So if your INS of your missile goes offline, then your system will not launch, right? If it doesn't know where it is. So again, if you look at current science, we can send information through many, many feet of concrete, which should be shielded by a Faraday cage. There's proof that that's not the case. And so, no, I think, again, it just goes back. We don't understand science. At least our mainstream science doesn't understand science. But looking at these cases, if you look at these cases, it does start to make sense that, yes, you can affect through concrete. You can travel faster than light. And that's why I'm also hesitant. You know, I just don't get excited about like 3i Atlas. You know, I don't get excited about this UAP video, which I believe very strongly is a balloon, because nothing we hear about from people, all the hundreds of people that I haven't interviewed, hundreds, but many dozens of people who've seen these things, credible people, it doesn't act like that. You know, they're not like, oh, I saw a comet flying by, and then it turns out it was an alien ship, you know? Or look at you're not shooting a UAP down with the Hellfire. It's just not going to happen. Look at what happened to all the Foo Fighter accounts. Like, they're shooting machine guns at it, everything, and it just goes right through. Like, it's operating on different physics. Like, it's not going to act like a comet. It's not going to act like a comet. Like, Avi Loeb's like, oh, this is an alien spaceship or whatever. But Avi Loeb, go and talk to all the people that have actually seen these things, and they don't act like comets. You know, they act like crazy electromagnetic, multi-dimensional objects. You know, they're going to interact with our consciousness in ways we can't understand because we don't really understand consciousness. So yeah, I think we're slowly getting there. I think, but enough people are lining up on the same general concepts. I think you came to the same conclusion that it's something to do. There's some alternate physics. We're all connected in some manner, just like you said. I believe it's
Yeah.
multidimensional. We can only
Yeah.
perceive this reality with our limited human capabilities. And I think we're part of a larger system. Actually, that's my whole view. Is it's a fractal nature of life and the universe, and so these systems that are in power
Yeah.
don't want us to know what's going on. It doesn't help them survive.
I completely agree. Yeah, I mean, I've always thought when people see things, if it's genuinely NHI, it needs to fall into the category of being highly strange. As soon as it's not highly strange, we need to be open, honest, and say that it's not. It's very important, because all it would really take is incredible evidence of an incredible event of the incredibly highly strange for people to really say, wow. But we should stop. We should be more open-minded at the prosaic. You know, I, I I think there's a lot of hatred and weirdness about the word debunking, but in fact, debunking of the 80% of sightings that aren't highly strange is really useful, because that focuses it in on the remainder, and the remainder is what's interesting, in my humble opinion.
I think you're spot on. Like we mentioned, Dylan Borland. I think his sighting is amazing of a
Sure.
TR3B on a base. We talked about
Yeah.
Dan Isbell. His sighting is amazing. Sightings, of triangle near
Sure.
a nuclear weapons storage facility.
Right.
If you look at Nusatelli, is a football size red triangle. I'm sorry, red
Mm.
square, football size red square, flying
Right.
again near a nuclear base. Again, Vandenberg,
Mm.
I believe, at least had tests ICBMs. I believe they also have ICBMs. Um, so I think that is the strange, and I think we should focus on those
Sure.
sightings. Whereas, like Nick Pope said, 95% of your cases are going to be mundane. Even the ones that look weird, 95% are going to be prosaic. But there's still that 5%, and so the sooner we can weed out the 95%, the better.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I mean, I think that's right. So let's not be too harsh on people who are doing very good work. And I, I, I've, I would never want to be in the shoes of Mick West. I mean, because poor Mick, he's going out and going, it's Ryanair flight 123, and people are going, it's a flying saucer, and it's not, and you should really give him the credit. I mean, maybe he's a bit down on the whole subject, but I mean, he's probably not. I think he would probably be very, very, very intrigued if we actually had decent evidence of something which you really can't explain. Um, do you think that AARO and the Congress have got video evidence or of anything which is incredible?
We certainly heard rumors that they have. Lou Elizondo says they have very compelling videos. I talked to another UAP task force member. I don't know if he didn't clear me to say anything, so I won't say his name, but he said that
No.
they were asked to receive videos from the Air Force, and the videos were actually intercepted. The tapes were intercepted. And we've also heard in this last hearing that AARO is acting as a counterintelligence agency. Actually, they're not in the business of trying to find out what's actually going on. So I think it's very probable that they do have compelling videos. We've also heard from Chris Mellon that there's actual videos from satellites showing orbs
Yeah.
near the poles. That was also said by Dan Brown. I think he said they also had very compelling videos with the Makia constellation. So there's certainly a lot of evidence pointing towards that they do have really compelling videos. But I think AARO is not interested in proving this, as they're showing now that they're more of a counterintelligence agency.
That's really very sad because so I think it's very much up to social media to actually and members of the public and whistleblowers to come forward and say things. Something going back to passive radar, one of the most amazing things that I've been hearing, I'm sure we've all been hearing, is that it's possible to set up a citizens passive radio network that would have enough people. If there were enough people with receivers, you could interface them, say, over a whole country, to see if there was anything disturbing the air that wasn't JetBlue. I mean, that would be, I would definitely have one on my roof, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it's just so difficult to make these sort of large citizen systems. I was a huge proponent of Sky 360 for years. I have even the coffee mug.
Oh yeah.
Sky 360, but I think ultimately, they couldn't make it work. It's very complicated. The best system I've seen so far is like the MooPass system. I have one of these things, and now I just moved it, where that's just a detector in your house. 500 people. I think he has over 300 people on that system.
Really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to set up these large distributed systems. There's also some apps, the Phenom app I know about, that's being created by Logan. So yeah, you do have these systems coming on board. But I think focusing on what is the underlying truth. That at some point you can only classify the truth for so long.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that the truth of the physics is going to come out. And I think it is going to take the decentralization that we have now is a huge advantage. And I think that we can get to the truth. And I think Nassim Haramein, he has a paper coming out in hopefully 2 weeks that will push us further. Good. And sooner or later, we're going to show that, the universe is electromagnetic. You can go faster than light. There is something related to consciousness, which is another interesting point, because if Faraday cages don't block out all information entering and leaving, then that really leans towards some sort of telecommunication, right? Basically being able to communicate with minds.
Right. The whole quantum consciousness debate is absolutely fantastic. I mean, we've seen it demonstrated by Stanford research and distant viewing, remote viewing. Badly named. It's neither. It's viewing into a connected consciousness would be a much better name for it. I mean, it's obviously it was targeted to intelligence who wanted to know what was behind the closed door, but it was very much a way of tapping into a timeless connected universe that we all feel that we actually have. I mean, I think, as I've often discussed, we use the word gut feeling or premonition. It's because we are connected. And I think some people are better at doing it than others, but we all need to understand that we live in a tiny sliver of consciousness, and consciousness is far wider than we possibly think. And it is physically possible. People do it all the time. Your bank manager, Chris Lehto, goes down to the bank for a house extension and promises to pay the bank back, and that bank manager has to assess you, but they're very good at predicting their future. They're supposed Russell Targ told me that never go to Gypsy Rose Lee. They're rubbish because they just tell you, like AI, what you want to know. But go to your bank manager because they're some of the best clairvoyants in the world. I think that was a great story.
Wow. Yeah. And science is catching up. You have you mentioned Russell Targ, remote viewing, definitely, but you also have Rupert Sheldrake, from England. He's been showing that there is some sort of telepathic links. there is some sort of morphic field, if you will. It sounds very much like some sort of ether, right? Some sort of quantum vacuum.
Right.
He's been showing that with proven science for decades. You also have
Decades, yeah.
Dean Radin. He's been doing this work for 40 years. I'm interviewing him hopefully again in this next month.
Great.
Yeah, he has, again, decades of research and more research coming out, more science experiments showing that we are linked in some sort of manner. There is a connected field. Somehow consciousness is related and consciousness is the base. And then the scientists, right? I would love to talk to Chris Chiba. You interviewed him. You know, he's showing as well through direct experiment that there is, you can generate electric microvolts from the spin of the Earth, right? That really leans towards the proof of a quantum vacuum.
Well, right, exactly. And that incredibly simple fact of putting a Faraday twisted bit of copper at the right angle because the Earth's magnetosphere is tilted, so you get an induced voltage. I mean, how
it's amazing.
Is that being captured? I mean, it's just amazing.
I can't believe more people aren't talking about it. Like when you came out, I remember you interviewed him and you made a video saying this day will go down in history. And I remember thinking, this is unbelievable. You know, this is an unbelievable breakthrough. And yet nothing, we've heard nothing for months.
No, I mean,
ridiculous.
Even, I mean, Chris is very much a physicist. He and his experiment was not to produce a decent voltage, which would be useful. He said he'll leave that up to the engineer. He wanted to absolutely prove that Faraday was correct, and Faraday was ignored. They knew the Faraday experiment actually was true, but they discounted it because it didn't need to be true. So Maxwell came along and said, oh, I know that nice Faraday is right, but I'll just write a different equation and we'll just forget about Faraday. But we live today in a world that you could put up a damn telegraph pole at an angle in your garden and power your freezer. No, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but I mean, we're going to make... But we're still got an electric meter ticking up from whatever power station is telling us a potential difference between their power station and your house. I mean, it's all about making money, Chris. But Chris, thank you. Keep up the good work. It was an absolute honor to work with you. And Dan together. That was such a good idea of mine.
Yes.
Because I really wanted you to help absolutely nail it, that Dan is completely 100% believable. His credentials, his background, his physics. I mean, we didn't even touch on what he did after the Air Force.
No, directed energy
weapons. I mean, so please, if you get a chance to talk to Dan about anything, I'd always lap up anything that you and he says. He's an absolute legend.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm in contact with him, so I'd be very happy to have him back on, and I know people would be interested. He has amazing stories. All of his stories were unbelievable, I thought.
Yeah, so you've got some great guests coming up. You've named a few. Fantastic. Keep pushing away at that kind of the door of physics. Really good stuff.
Yeah, and Charles Bueller, I just got word today that he was willing to come on the show as well. His electrostatic propulsion systems from NASA. So I think it can't be hidden for long. I think we're really close, and I think it is working, like sharing this information, getting these guys talking, like highlighting Chris Chiba's work. Like you showed Chris Chiba, I didn't know about it before your video. And so I think this decentralized information media system that we have now, I think will be the way forward.
Yeah, keep watching. I'm doing this film this week about possibly the real truth of Aurora, which is, and that's the kind of thing that conventional media just wouldn't touch. But you can dig into some facts. Nick Cook, from Jay's Defense Weekly, knows information, and here on social media, Chris and I and lots of other channels are really pushing boundaries, talking to scientists who don't get the kind of chance to actually describe their work. So, folks, subscribe to everything that you like and keep watching, because there's lots and lots of interesting things coming up, because we live in interesting times. Chris, thank you very much for today's chat. Keep in touch and keep up the good work, mate. I so enjoy watching your channel.
Yeah, the same, Simon. Thank you so much. Thank you, mate.
Right.